Hey there, it's Jason from Codemanship with another video diary entry. It starts with a little bit of a musical intro. We'll get to that in a minute. If you're enjoying these videos, please like and subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. So this week I wanted to celebrate the achievements of small teams, small development teams. And to do that, I wanted to sort of show 3 examples of what can be achieved by small development teams. And then we'll talk a little more generally about why I think small teams are a good idea. They're the way to go. So first of all, the music. Right, that was a little demo that I put together using real analog synthesizers, recorded in a digital audio workstation, a piece of recording software called Reaper, which I've been using for over a decade now, and I'm a big fan of Reaper. Now, Reaper is a very full-featured digital audio workstation. It has hundreds of features and plugins and all kinds of things going on, and you might assume that something this complex might have involved, a big team, hundreds and hundreds of developers. But in actual fact, if we take a look at the Reaper website, if we look on their team page, it's a handful of people. It's a handful of people. Now, Reaper is about 17 years old, I think, and it's evolved quite rapidly over those years. And it's also a very stable product. And I think these things are probably related. If I just read their sort of little mission statement, as it were, our goal is to develop software sustainably. That's a very interesting word, while preventing profit rationale from forcing engineering compromises. By doing so, we can keep our product visions intact, giving maximum benefits to our users. That's one big advantage of small independent teams. We lovingly craft the software that we want to use. Now, there's an interesting choice of words. We lovingly craft the software that we want to use. And Reaper, aside from the main sort of Reaper digital audio workstation, there's a bunch of other products that they've developed over the years that are jolly useful, including a product called Restream, which is the product I'm using to stream the output from Reaper, the audio output, into my video recording software, into Open Broadcaster. So there's a whole bunch of great stuff that they've worked on, but it was just a handful of people, the efforts of a handful of people over the last 17 years. And you can well imagine that their code bases now are in the millions of lines of code, potentially. Another product I wanted to show you, which is very closely related, and to demonstrate this product, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn all of the effects off on my synthesizers here. So if I just deselect our effects, that's a soft synth there. The rest are all, let's turn down on the bass. So this is the Model D from Behringer, by the way, which I'm a big fan of. Okay, so there's only a handful of little synths on there. Let's just dip into the middle of the music somewhere. Oh, you can still hear, let's... we've got some. Okay. So we turn all of the effects off there, all of the reverbs and the delays. It's a bit retro, isn't it? It's a bit 8-bit. Let's turn these effects back on, and I'll talk about these effects in a minute. So first of all, reverb, very important for synthesizers. Otherwise it sounds very dry and okay. We'll turn that one on. I don't think that one was selected. So all tracks that are a big soaring sort of Blade Runner kind of lead going on there. So effects, just to get to the point. Effects like reverb and delay, very, very important if you're using synthesizers or guitars or any instrument that sounds a bit boring and dry without them, and they're certainly the secret sauce in synth music. Very classic. Now, the products that I'm using to generate the delay and the reverbs and other things are created by a company called Valhalla Dsp. Valhalla Dsp, and they make they make delays and they make reverbs. There's our shimmer reverb, which is always a good one to slap on a synth if you're interested in. And the big one of all, my favorite one that I slap all over everything because I'm not very choosy. And the one that's making that melody soar is the Vintage Verb, which has a preset called the Huge Synth Space. That's where you get that kind of Blade Runner-esque sound. So I'm a big fan of Valhalla Dsp, a whole product range there of all kinds of effects. And let's take a look at their website and see how many people are working on Valhalla products. So there's the website, valhalladsp.com. And if we click on the About page, and let's take a look at the size of their team here. It's 3 people. It's 3 people. And by the looks of it, only one of them... Oh, no, two of them. 2 out of 3 people are actually working on the software side, 2 developers. These are products that are used by a lot of people, by the way. A lot of people really rate these products, and I'm a big fan as well. These are not sponsored recommendations, by the way. I just love them. So there's a couple of companies that are developing reasonably complex products. Particularly Reaper, with just a handful of people over a number of years. The third one I wanted to highlight, and I'm not entirely impartial on this one, is an Xbox game that was released in 2013 called Smatter. Now, Smatter is a 2D shooter, and a very good one, and all of the development and all of the graphics and all of the sound, the music and the sound effects were done by the same person, who just happens to be my brother, who is a C# developer and a very good one. So he took a year and a half off because he just really wanted to write his own Xbox game. This is, again, it's appreciably a complex product. It's 100,000 lines plus. And I don't think he spent the whole year and a half on it. I think there was an element of decorating that went on too, since he was at home with time on his hands. I think there was a bit of apartment decorating went on. So let's call it a year's work. For one developer, one good developer for 1 year produced a pretty complex computer game of 100,000 lines plus. And I see examples of this all the time. Small teams of dedicated, skilled software engineers producing sometimes very complex products in the order of 1 million plus lines of code. I've seen them write operating systems, for example, modern operating systems with internet and graphics and stuff. I want to celebrate that because I think that's the way to do it. And I make no secret of that fact. I'm not a believer that software development scales. And people who've been working in software for long enough know that there is no economy of scale in software development. If you've got a team of 6 developers and you add 6 more, you're not going to get twice the software. If you add another dozen more to that, you're probably going to get less software. And we know why that is. We've known for a long time. So all the myths about scaling up software and throwing more people at projects were kind of very thoroughly debunked in the mid-1970s, so a long time ago, by Fred Brooks in his book, The Mythical Man Month. And one of the effects that kicks in, because this has a lot to do with dependencies between developers and teams, is lines of communication. The more people we add to a team, or the more teams we add to a project, the more lines of communication we effectively create, till we get to the point where the communication overhead is so big that that's pretty much all they're doing. And that's not just having meetings and that kind of stuff and reading emails. It's also other forms of communication, like, for example, merging. The bigger the team is, the more time they seem to spend in merge hell, sort of fixing the conflicts between each other's changes. So in that sense, it doesn't scale. The only way to scale it is to have these people or these teams working in relative isolation, truly in parallel. And for that, there have to be few, if any, dependencies between the code that they're working on. So if you have 10 product teams working on 10 products, that scales. If you have 10 product teams working on one product, that doesn't scale. I've never seen it scale. And I defy anybody who claims that they can make it scale to produce real evidence of that. Economically, small teams make the most sense. They usually get about as much done. If you had a few more people, you might get a bit more done in the same time, but at a much higher cost. So there's a trade-off here between time and cost, and that trade-off doesn't last long. Once you get past maybe a dozen developers, usually what we find is the team starts to slow down because of that communication overhead starts to kick in. It's just chaos, basically. So I'm a big fan for all those reasons of small teams of skilled software developers. Now, this runs counter, of course, to certain commercial interests. The scaled agile industry, as it is now, has a vested interest in convincing us that you can scale this stuff up. But we see very little real evidence that you can have scale and agility. So whatever they're doing at scale, it's not agile. Usually things take a lot longer and cost a lot more. Now, if you're building products like Microsoft Office, which probably has thousands of developers working on it, if you're building products like that are making billions and billions of dollars, you can kind of throw money at it. You're still going to make a profit. But for companies like the company that creates Reaper or the company that creates the Valhalla products, that's not going to work for them. The best way forward is fewer developers, and if you need to, give them a bit longer. Although quite often you don't need to. I mean, you'd be surprised what a handful of software developers can achieve in a year. So let's celebrate small teams. Let's favor them. So unless you're Facebook or Microsoft and can throw billions at a product because it's going to make tens of billions for you, for most of us, for us mere mortals, there's less lucky people, small teams are the way to go. And whether that's internal systems for businesses or whether that's software products like Valhalla's products, the same applies. Smaller is better. Small is beautiful. There you go. It's a sunshiny morning here in London. Hope you're well. Until the next video diary, keep on rocking.